chapter, Kanin Sumet, Gitani, Kamsam Chuji Jabo, Jimmy of the Jedo Chuji Dayan Bara, Tambe Chaja, Mame Bala, Govera, Gubati, Gun and so on, the King of Sanjo. Giovanni Ceru Tanje de Toxeva Jimbe Guni, Jesus on one that so can be shot on Tabi Mangas and then been down the James and Bessis and the Savan Rock make it to your Pugindama, good nature and depends on the Kanjabi, Tong, Pemakabi, Happy, Dali in Sojo. Ujin Soli Peme Dong Bazar, Debbie Namda Ranjan and Jedran, Santa Pete, and then Somba Pemam Jone, Dal, Penzoro. Chicken sleeping generation, what are going to consume members of a load of the joke on it about American Kalan. Jammer Jonabe Muji, they couldn't give it so good. Into Pemakapon, Zimbishara, Lesson of the Tonga Travan, Hingham and Solo to Joe, Agapamber Gale, so Jammer Jonathan, Gumbilon, Poppy Jet. Long to chimney jumping on your Mohom Jambian last or one the counter Togarin Jing Bigo and the Gunja each other dining between the baby Nam Yerba, Jen Chuji Jabola, Sorvanda, Nilo, Towa, everything yellow. Kanda Tuju Tunga Jidena, the yellow Najerva comes that in the Tembichu Chambana, Yambranda Banta Dan, the like it on the Damaging, Etamunda Damajikin, Raku Jaki, Kenyeba. Tamjike the dog chuten do Anita Tari Dwala Teni Yamju Nangan Sama la Anit Tomar Tashi Deleida or Tomashi Sela.
First, I just want to greet everyone who's joining us here tonight with the Tashi Dele.
Ani da nga so khatsong ani songchu teni mange chetang chena da rama ta de chini ma she goyan da buchi chetang re te inayo ta da nga so ta di par tene da bachi sa ji ba de chön de so ani dingo ne ten song da buchi te se ji je gi yin se la.
And so, generally, it would have been good and appropriate for us to continue this sequence of teaching straight through, but we had a month where things were interrupted here, where we didn't get to continue forward. So I want to first start by going back and, having a bit of a reminder about what led us up, what brings us to the current topic today. So go back through a little bit about the previous topics.
Hemaguata Nasukare de Jig Tepachemo with Chuji here, Yata, and it's also Gayanda, Sanjo to the Toki, Sihiore. The Tanjo to the Toki said the Garde City Pagi, don't have a sim jela, make Jenny. The Hege the Nidi Dongante, Jim de Logic, Jim de Lotte Young, Nikot Sanchi, Don Zanda. Then Nyasa Deva some Maimba. And then number Tamkin be compound going to driven that in a tatupa. Then the G la going to Logila and it's until the same say.
So I think this goes without saying that here, as we are learning about the Mahayana Dharma, that it's always said should generate bodhicitta. And what is that bodhicitta? That is the mind which focuses on the suffering of sentient beings and wishes to protect them from those sufferings, from all of those sufferings, and not just in the immediate sense, not just by protecting them from simple pains of hunger or putting them in a comfortable place to live and sleep, but to actually ultimately liberate them from all states of suffering and bring them to that ultimate state of Buddhahood in the state of omniscience. And the state that we wish to bring those beings to or place them in is a state where all suffering has been eradicated, and it is the attainment of the ultimate level of attainment and the eradication of the ultimate eradication of all suffering.
도디소나 아니 가서 다리다마 해대야들 지당 것들네 장촌주고 취심 자둔세니 전반예바 잡아 예 양다과 봉바 예 증표지 강바 예 왕봉아 똥아 장초지인라드 파빌람이라 제당 기바데 아니 아 대예게 연대 타토바 뭔데 전도도 갑라 아니 상지세 양나 니 람가 유비노니 람 예게 곰저 쳐바티 기타테소 데니 가세레 나파 타토비체나 상지야세 같이 디긴 리벨라테니 까번 데피기 때니 로젠질래야 다 장초지 셈사.
So to connect this back to the presentation we're going through right now, then we're talking about the 37 factors of enlightenment are the 4 close mindfulnesses, the 4 genuine restraints, the 4 bases for miraculous powers, the 5 powers, the 5 irresistible forces, the 7 elements leading to enlightenment, and the 8-fold noble path. And so when all of those factors are made fully manifest, then that is known as the state of Buddhahood. We can also talk about it in terms of the 5 paths, where all of these factors, these 37 principles of enlightenment or 37 factors of enlightenment are the things to be practiced or meditated upon or practiced while on the first of the 4 paths, leading on to the attainment of Buddhahood on the 5th path. And so when we generate bodhicitta, we are wishing to bring those sentient beings to that ultimate culmination of these 37 factors, which is the ultimate state of Buddhahood on the 5th level.
That's it. That penate seta lamla jasuna ta tambo someday ani di solam samla.
And when we
Oh
yeah. Okay. When we talk about those 3 sets or all of those sets of the 37 factors of enlightenment, then the first 3 sets, the 4 close mindfulnesses, 4 genuine restraints, and 4 bases of miraculous powers take place on the path of accumulation. And then the 5 powers and the 5 irresistible forces are on the path of joining. And then the 7 elements leading to enlightenment are applied to or take place within the context of the path of seeing.
And then palam jebote ane jolam ya.
Gomlam.
Gomlam. Ma pabrodoa.
And then the 8-fold noble path is applied to the path of meditation.
Oh, let's say. Da then the songs and that then Sancho Chuku choose some Zadumpo de and it's a right now what you do the gabla, Lobilaba, Satum de Labada, Jake, Dingin Zinga Labada, Ni, Shirab de Labada song. The Labaramboji song data, Naso Jula Machiba, Jibazo, Jiba, Manyambazo, Manyamba de Goni Condem, Pepper Zone, Tatu been driven that day, and the Yagita, is Hanji Compounds age.
And so these 37 factors of enlightenment can be also talked about within the context or gathered within the principles of the 3 superior trainings. And those are the superior training in discipline, the superior training in meditative concentration, and the superior training in wisdom. And so those are sometimes referred to as the 3 precious trainings, the 3 higher trainings, or the 3 superior trainings. And so we, in our practice, we first generate those where they have not yet arisen. Then we try to not allow them to decline where they have arisen, where we have generated them, and then we try to increase the power of them ever more. And when that power reaches its ultimate culmination, then that is known as the state of Buddhahood.
Loblam secret, that's how Majit Simchutella, Loblam secret, Lam Shupa Kang, she, some Majit Simchutella, Loblam, set up Lab Jimbic Lam Chite. That the solar and in the Sancho choose some Zadumpo de, and Sapatang, keep it so you're the Sapa. Tang Jin do it in the Sames Chabare, and that Dindig Chabajires.
And so when we're talking about these paths, the first 4 are what are referred to as the paths of training. And so those are the practices where we're working with these 37 factors. And they have a difference between the fifth path, or the path that is referred to as Buddhahood, the path of no more training, in that it's said that the practices in the paths of training are called contaminated paths, and the state of Buddhahood is uncontaminated.
Okay. That thing as don't put out with Java. That's simply
and so that's just a little bit of a summary of what we already went through together with our generation of bodhicitta. Any kind of shady sakche sagme cheper dawa chiksona.
Let's say that sakpa that takes the Numunda. Sem da nyumunda nre devanda wuji da yang dikidurwala. Takpa meba se undu da kasere di sem da sem da sem yong jiwa tamchi ta takpa yin si sheni ane chuni gungo chapa jigla da sakpa meba anda wuji se da ngaso tadji gochu sare.
And so I asked Khen Rinpoche to say just a little bit about what he meant when he said that the paths of training are contaminated versus the state of Buddhahood being uncontaminated. And he explained that that the paths of training, what we mean by contamination, means that there is still some element of afflicted mind and some element of ordinary mind. And so when we say uncontaminated in the state of Buddhahood, all of the movements of ordinary mind and mental factors have been utterly purified and pacified into basic space, and that awareness has become the ultimate or true reality. It's no longer so-called contaminated by the stirrings of ordinary mind and mental factors.
Ane da ngaso dendrawo ngigi julaya da machi pashi kevar chepala kandris chegore ngo kani chogore compare cheyala kandichi gore then tatsambala kandichi gore seji that diguni takes hienas.
Okay, so now I want to say a little bit about how are we to first start to generate those if we haven't started in this at all. Then how do we try and increase the power of that, and how do we bring that to a state of perfection?
Ta nige kasere undo te dubra chebala tambo teni di da ki zangchong chu chu sim sta dun senanda ki chetawa dong je nyeba serbala ta chetawa se di chuni ge je nyeba se di chujen de di chuni de chujen ge da chetawa yin de ngaso tambo hiba de garche de chego de ka de na ani lamla tambo nyudu thiba dang samba so je ane gombala yang tenen jupina so chukje lamse solong ko kaptana so gibi hienye ne tsnya soso tiba jeya samba jeya tene deda henge de gomche ni chuksa driba jangne o tende skeni tenen jong de kala tela tenen chukje lamse.
And so in order for me in this example to develop to cultivate experiences and realizations, if I'm trying to engage in these practices, develop these qualities of the 37 factors of enlightenment, then I first need the most important thing in the beginning is for me to really understand the meaning of what things are in reality and what they are in their ordinary kind of phenomenal form. And so to really understand both the kind of conventional and ultimate aspects of reality. And so in the beginning, primarily what I should begin with is hearing and contemplating the teachings. And along with that, do some meditation as well. But primarily, my primary job in the beginning is to listen to rely upon my teacher, hear their teachings, study and contemplate those teachings. And together with that, also do some meditation, but primarily hearing and contemplation. And so then in that, I am gathering accumulations, I am purifying obscurations, and that's why it's called the path of accumulations. That's the first path.
Anta dinde sonda ta ngaso sosu ge garinda ji gongwananda garinda ji nyamlen ji honanda 당보 델라페 티픽 고네 책을 드럼도 삼비 고네 달라파 드럼도 제니 같이 다파지 니게디 히야 로지 조야 데페 같이 무차도 왔어.
And so no matter what we're meditating on, or no matter what we're putting into practice in the beginning, isn't it most important that we first cut through any of our misunderstandings and perfectly understand the words of those teachings, and then also cut through our misunderstandings to perfectly understand the meaning of those things. So that's really, isn't that the most important thing in the beginning, is to really understand the words and meaning.
아니 파타 지 가른 냠네 제네 디기 톨라다 투섬라고 지게다 지 야부지 히차디다 다노야 소잡 대가랑 꼬라잡 다노 소잡 대가랑 꼬라잡라 마다 책라 야야 때 마마 때디나 다 그바요 말에 되니 다 디니 마 곰종을 보고요.
And so then with whatever the practice is, once we've already really done all of our successful study, our hearing and contemplation, and we've really understood the words and meaning, then to continue just stubbornly and persistently just pushing and pulling at the words and arguing about this and that is quite pointless. And so once we've understood the words and meaning, then we should engage in meditation.
Then gomjong goni tenen baundukala then 토마를 나서다 직대 비그 곰 세네다 샘 이교당 기비 처지고니 춘이 뜻다비시 인삼네 이교당 기비 처지고니 때나 법니 고미야지 마도 이교의 만대위게 나서 이시게 되네 취지 인된 통진이 통투를 잡아대 나서 특구여 말해 근데 손자 이교당 기비 처지고니 되네 곰중조 때나 빠운데까라 아니 곰빌람세
졸람 레벨
어레 졸람
And so then when we're going to start engaging in this meditation, then in the beginning, we first have to still have some kind of discrimination or distinctions made inside of our ordinary mind to think like reality is like this or like that. Because in the beginning, we can't work without some mental discrimination or mental discretion. We're not able to immediately jump to the level where our timeless awareness can just rest within basic space. So we still have to use the movements of our ordinary mind. And so our meditation, which is still based in the movements and discriminations of ordinary mind, is what we're doing on the path of joining, which is the second of the 5 paths.
I see. And that in the song that Benanda Jiktebi Gomjong Tangbo that Benada Julum da turned out which Chagrivala that Julum turned out that Trug Kopsala Nyameng True takes a tubina and it drew Sikatongama here must now to be thinking Zizeni. And
so this is what we still call a worldly path of meditation. And so the first level of that is called on the path of joining. The first subsection of the path of joining is called warmth or heat, and it's because you've started to gain the warmth, like this warm feeling, like that the meditative experiences are coming on, so you can start to feel the warmth of that, and that's how that first level gets its name.
That's it. Da dendrige be da chunik pena re da dena pena chunige da Dressity that the Zonda which is currently Gogu Senata Jerry Tipa Chimbi Lola Chu Tamchi Demba Nis Yachini Kunzup Dan Tambi Demba number Nis Yachini da Tatopate Dan Tambi Demba de Naso Togo Yorita Reval Dan Demba Togo that Dan Tambi Demba de Deni Nyambachi 춘익 돼서 탐지를 왔다 냠바지를 왔다 같이 마홍바지다 냠바지래다 코베데 가체는 다도다 동이 스히요레 같이 두저다지 스히요다 같이 체 있는 미나다 지 다도 춘익 동바지기 물람 물라더니 냠히요레 왔다 Dindri Songzanta, Dindri Gita, Castle Tony Topas and a code de Chihodo, Cache Tony de Togu, but de Coro dig Telam Babjagita, Yanda with it, so what it did.
And so what we're doing in this time in that path of joining is we are trying to ascertain perfectly what is the meaning of ultimate reality. And so when we're talking about Dharma, we always talk about it in terms of the two truths, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. And finally, or ultimately, the ultimate truth is the thing that we need to come to a realization of. And so when we talk about ultimate reality, we're talking about a state of equanimity, of the equality of all phenomena, that it's not that in the space or in the state of this singular reality of emptiness, everything is equal. And so sometimes that's referred to as, emptiness. Sometimes that's referred to as the freedom from all conceptual elaborations, whatever terms we want to apply. That's what we're trying to ascertain. That's what we're trying to get at on the path of joining.
That's it. Ane, this home that deep and a drug come that some drug come that the carry truth was it penanga so cheap. Zuma Yordan Zamba. That's him. Number is young here. What did you do? Zuma te so tamche sama ta gasere. Take pata na ta opi pa gasere drop up at some rava opi drop up at dita naso di now that the Zuma the Zuma yoga chati yita so and then the rangi matapachi. 대가장신 통제니 아니 나게 점바게 대 뽕미기 때문에 년보라 앞에는 또 나당 근데 대인데 다대 덴바니라서 봐 덴바니다 또 나라서 봐 덴딜라 근데 좀득거라 아니 다다 드 나와 다 베네 주니 대가서 두고다 가서리 중앙 여대서 담기 데메스도 점바 샘데 차와 송다 데메스 또요 말했대 so
and so what's really meant by the word warmth, like what warmth does one attain? What level of realization or understanding does one attain? So when we talk about that, then we can talk about the apprehended object versus the subjective perceiver. And so when we're talking about that, then on the level of warmth, one realizes the emptiness or the merely imputed nature of the apprehended or objectified objects, the things that are taken as objects of mind, which we refer to as the apprehended aspects. And so they are realized to be not ultimately or inherently existing. And although one at that level realizes and gains that warmth, which is the realization of the emptiness or the absence of any true existence of the objects, because the subjective mind or the subjective aspect here is so much more subtle than the coarse objects, one is still not able to realize the emptiness of the subjective aspect, but is able to realize the emptiness of the objects. And so that's why that is the level of realization that the person at this point has. But the realization of the non-true reality of the objects leads them in the direction to begin investigating the lack of reality of the subjective aspect, but they're not quite there yet. So it's only the realization of the objects. Let's.
Tendis genuine the tatin jitem be gomjung ta kyongse thapane ane rains rub ane zopa di number yetela ane jolomla number yetse cheni ane kasere ta jula tene thupdukala tene dela ta jolom zore wala ta kachen jitem be gomjung kyongse thapane ane rainche ane rabje ane zopa jitembe gomjon ta zopa ta kiba te thawndi kaptena ane ta ko ngasota di jolom 그때는 다 랑타츠 말하고 있지라. 야, 어떤 데서
And so that's the beginning, this warmth, the first stage of what we call the worldly paths of meditation. And so basically it goes through 4 stages of, you have this very beginning, that at that stage of warmth, and then the middling state, supreme state, and perfected state. And that's how there are 4 kind of levels that the path of joining is broken up into.
다 디겁라다 디 왕나다 똥마세다 곰자데솔라다 대저 땡히르 다 디딩아 파지 송고지 말이라 다 같이 디나 되게 또블라 땡치니 아니 같이 다지 남줘바되게다 곰드겁라 아니 다디 졸음대한테니 타칭
And so then on the path of joining, we talked about last time, and I don't think I need to repeat them here, the 5 powers and the 5 irresistible forces. And so then when one has fully attained mastery over those factors, then one has perfected or completed the path of joining.
All I say, yeah, that's a number the gods some shit, Ale, Tambotati, Ore. That dimension de la sama da jikten bigalam seduwarda the dimension de sama jikten bigalam seduwarda.
And so everything leading us up to here, up to and including the path of joining with the 5 powers and the 5 irresistible forces, are referred to as a worldly path or worldly paths.
Let's say ani da dinge gar here senada katon ros back ani 소전이 데라 아니 직 남접에티가 람드로동 답에나 람디 줄라 마치베 째바서 찌바데서 담지 공패서야키 아니 람데 덴데스네 공판 타투바데 찌바 아니 덴데스레스.
And so what I've just gone through here is to review what we already went through previously, the sections of the 37 factors. And so those encompass the paths of accumulation and the paths of joining, and they are describing the way that a yogi would practice, the way that they would move through these practices and the objects that, or the practices that they would go through, and how they would generate these qualities where they had not already possessed them, how they would increase the power of those and lead them to their perfected states.
That's it. 아니 다가서 드링이 시에자라 따다 안도는마다 다양 찾아말.
Okay, so I better get going on the actual topic of today's lecture, otherwise I'm not going to finish.
올라서 다 디기 강가다 가서 당보 람데 야야바이나 되니 때서 또 되봐요. 다 람데 당보 통일 람세 되니 야기요래.
So now when we move beyond the states that we've already talked about with passive accumulation and path of joining, then let's stick with the progress of paths. That's the easier way to talk about it now. And so the next path is the path of seeing.
다딘 통놈 그 제라고데 디메케가 초전이데 통놈 그 제레 아니 곰놈된 리브 차르고요레 같이 다 짐디 나오레 다 야나던데지레스.
And so when we talk about the path of seeing, we could say that the paths of accumulation and the paths of joining are the causes for the generation of the path of seeing, and that the path of meditation is the result of the path of seeing.
Let's say that the chitanga beji that longchen bag that the penantonum singing taking sending that then taking zulum taking jolum zupi jila jonghians taking give the bakanhista jolum zo and taking geva in dengage jolum the zupi geva in dengage.
And so Longchenpa gives a definition of the path of seeing. He calls it the perfected virtue of the path of joining.
Anita Techen Jiktenlin Dipi Gomlum Kejik Tambo Shijula Jeva, give it your bass. Ta Jiktenlin Dipi, ta Gomlum Kejik, ta Revala, ta Kejik Tambo Shijula Jeva, ta Jikten Bati Mecheredora, 다 직대바 당보 다 줄에 째바 찌글 직대는 디비기도 이히 줄 당보 째바 때는 무슨
And then he further defines it as the first moment when one transcends the worldly path into the supramundane path of timeless awareness.
다 텐데 송다 다 같이 베나다 가서 직대는 디비히 다 오래단 들으셨는데도 답변은 나라지 통나 타바이나 빼잖아. 당아 딩을라 딘더비다 같은 통나이다. 주니께 만용비다. 첩세지 당가서 세니 티바이나 러버다. 다시 이게 찬에 라양 코발은 코 말에 디 소시티오 용도 주니요 말다. 땡더 코는 파파 차도요. 드리질다 통남세.
And so, like, taking me for an example, let's just say that I attained the path of seeing, then there's no way that I have ever attained the path of seeing before. We could say that with absolute certainty. Like if we were in a philosophical debate in the kind of debate style of presentations, we would say that if you're someone who has attained the path of seeing, then there is no possible way that you have ever attained the path of seeing before. Because once you've attained the path of seeing, there's no way for you to revert from being an Arya or noble being. There's no way for you to become an ordinary being again.
다 들어지 빼나단 직대는 디비 희세로다 직대는 디비 희세 온데다 가래 직다 장초 선바디기 온독을 자고라발다 온독을 자롱디 깔았다 롱첸 바게는 똑비 쳐버리 야운데 춘이 끈든 루비 더 똑세 세난라 직대리 디비 히럽제 다음에 온섬도 똑바 다 직대리 디비 히럽그 다음에 온섬도 똑바세 난다. 춘이 끈든 루비 더 똑바세 난다. 춘이 온섬도 통세 난다. 오다 델라드니 직대는 디비 람세.
And so what do we mean when we say this word, a supramundane or beyond the worldly path or beyond worldly timeless awareness or primordial wisdom? What does that mean? So that means, and Longchenpa describes this, he says that it is understanding that the true reality, the ultimate reality, pervades to everything. And he further says that it is the wisdom, which is beyond ordinary wisdom, which directly sees selflessness.
다 대lang에 따른 책하히직 사해라제나 디 통롱구 menchege 때문에 다 베능아그디 추니 주드세는다 동니세는다 데 아니 가세리 응원섬데 다 가세리 가서 디 똑바나 다 응원섬 다디 남정응원섬데 다 디해 그랄 다 응원섬도 통화디 다디 menchera 다 남정응원섬 통화디 다 men도고요다 응원섬 남정응원섬 대양 꾼든 루비 danse 추 탐제기 추니 또바디 아니 디 메켈 메디기어다.
And so let me clarify a little bit about what was just said there. So everything leading up to the path of seeing, everything below the path of seeing, in those instances, if someone is meditating on the meaning of reality, the freedom from conceptual elaborations, emptiness, whatever you want to call it, they do not have a yogic direct perception of that. And they're not only lacking direct perception of it, they also don't realize that that reality pervades to everything.
응원섬바지 단통 똑바 매비기 고니다 응원섬 통행질 야고래라 디는 남저 응원섬 세운디 남저 바티가 공운디 갑라 아니 남저 바텔라 데니 띵인징 탑 띵인징 톱디고니 추니 강연바델라 또더 마터비 쳐디고니 응원섬데 통화델라야 통 발람세는다 통음세는다 다 당보들은 통함세 아니 디엔체들아 되는 거는 바긴 원한도 그랬어.
And so when we define what is direct perception, direct perception is known as something which is free of any thought, and which is free of any delusion. And so it's an awareness which is free of thought and free of delusion. And so when we talk about a yogic direct perception, that means that this is a yogi, a practitioner, and they attain the power of meditative concentration, of samadhi. And with that samadhi, then their mind is directed or resting within that state of the freedom from all conceptual elaborations, the true reality, in a manner which is free from any thought and which is undiluted. And so the first moment when that arises in one's mind, then that is known as the path of seeing. And then moving forward, as they continue to develop their experience of that, then it's called the path of meditation. So let me just to clear up a little bit, then just a general ordinary level of direct perception that we have as ordinary beings is like our sense perceptions. Our sense perceptions are direct perceptions. For example, when I look at this cup, there's no delusion. I'm not deluded about the cup, and there's also no intervention, or there's no thought or conception involved. So that is a direct perception of this cup, but it's just an ordinary sense perception. But in this instance, when we're talking about this yogic direct perception, then there is no, obvious direct object like this cup, as in my sense perceptions. So coming back to the path of joining, when we were talking about the warmth on the path of joining, and we have the apprehended objects and the subjective aspects of you as the subject, then in that instance of the warmth on the path of joining, the practitioner realizes the emptiness and the true reality of the subjective objects, but not of the objects, the apprehended objects, but not of the subjective perceiver. And so, but when one not only realizes the emptiness of the objects, but also of the subjective perceiving mind, then they see the equanimity or the equality of all things. They see the equal reality of all things without any kind of dualistic perceptions of good and bad and splitting this from that or anything, but sees the equality of emptiness or the equality of reality of all phenomena. And so that only happens with a direct perception on the level of the path and seeing and upwards.
Ane ta pangwi chepa da ji ya sumba ina ta ka se tokwa che on di pa pang ni ene thongwi gates chepa de pang go ba di ene ta rakwa ta ji nga so la ta da di chuni nyamni man thongwi ge ene ka se ngoji ge rice chepa ane rakwi cha de ya de ne zo loi pa ta ya lo ta ge rai yi ta de so de ne ka se ke ji de na pa de ni 탐지 코나 짜바 중징이 쳐지고니 니기 빵 누라 마 초저거 급대서니 그 ngo는 짜마도 빵 타비기다 쳐 된this yoris.
And so that's a distinction between like the path of joining and the path of seeing in terms of the level of realization. One is direct and one is only kind of conceptual, or there's still a conceptual overlay. And then there's also a difference in the power of abandonment or the power of overcoming the afflictions in that on the path of seeing. So when you have a realization, together with that realization, there's an elimination of those things that were preventing that realization. And so primarily what is prevented or what is removed here are the mental imputations, like our ideations that our mind kind of projects onto reality, which were preventing us from understanding the equal nature of all things. And so the difference in abandonment here is that here they are completely abandoned from the root, whereas in the path of joining, they were only suppressed but not eliminated.
That decomes a yantenda which cassette did Sanjo somebody Julie Jane with Sena. Then it are you intend the Jata Unis here. That Jata say on the Jare Jarity at the Dire. That Della the Dichi Casse catching my chigla, dig cassette to racing in it. Dig in as Dunkuyo.
And then there's less. Then there's a whole description of the qualities that are attained on the path of seeing, that like the Bodhisattva who attains the path of seeing in a single instant on the path of seeing, then there's 12 sets of 100 kind of qualities. And it says, so in a single instant, they can do 100 of this or that. And there's 12 like lists of those or 12 sets of those.
And it up in a did Maggie Solom Chembo that the surgical Sanji Musin Jari Seji loves one. That didn't on a kigla. And then Rangalu Ja Sanji Janja Jai Kundini Chusha to be out. Then Drigit in Eco Casset Nyam Segonada Kache and this chinta that.
Like, for example, like one of these kind of qualities is that it is even said, like in the greater level of the path of accumulation, that someone would be able to actually see the Buddha and receive their teachings. But here on the path of seeing in a single instant, you could emanate. You could manifest or emanate 100 forms of your own body, which could go to 100 different Buddhas and in an instant receive their Dharma from these 100 different Buddhas and things like that. There's a whole list of qualities like that.
And they call us up in a thing in Zinginyam, that's what Chichire Denecassi, young children, Servala, Copeti, Lutita, Delitanita, the Enche, the Sotam Jetinida, Jata Uni, Tontra Uni, Trat Unis, and then a pair, Takassi, cotting in Zing the pet, the Nyam, the Shukmochi on the Gala, and then Digita, right? Massive Mambo, the Yachure.
And there's an even greater presentation of, because there's so many of these potential experiences through the power of meditative concentration. And as one continues on these paths, those lists of 100 become 100, then 1,000, then 10,000, and so forth, as the power of one's meditative experiences become even stronger.
That's it. And that is Dangi, you depend Jata Union and Nanoni Pen Luja to Sanji Janjayatini. I call so dango and Rabjire. That then Rawochi Union Payajo, that theater, that ring as he to say Marilla, and in the Nayachini. And indeed, the Tongaji Capsulata, Sanjo Chukuchis, doing no ni, and it carries that tickle ruins.
And so I just gave you an example about like those lists of 100 that, that you can manifest 100 bodies, see 100 Buddhas, receive 100 teachings, all that. And there's a whole list of 12 of those things. And this is not really the time to get into that. So I'm going to move on to now the main topic, which is when you're in the path of seeing, then which of these practices of the 37 factors of enlightenment are involved or are you engaged in?
Oh, let's say any that so yeah. Sancho Chukuchis ni ane Sancho Diana Dun setting it.
And so now, amongst those 37 factors of enlightenment, we are on to the list, which is called the 7 elements leading to enlightenment. Okay, and so those 7 are, they are the object of focus, the accompanying attitude, the mindfulness, perfect discernment. I might be mixing this up. 1 minute. No, the first of the 7 is mindfulness. The second is perfect discernment. The third is diligence. The fourth is joy. The fifth is flexibility. the 6th is concentration, and the 7th is evenness. If you're looking at the text that we posted online, it's on page 7 in the second paragraph there.
Okay. All the tattering, Chinama deep at the starting it in a Monday,
Okay, so Khen Rinpoche said, look at the text a bit, and I'm going to explain a bit more about those elements.
Ani tan delape Sangchabda Yena Seni.
And so there are 2 terms in the Tibetan here. So here it says 7 elements, but it literally says 7 branches leading to enlightenment. So the 2 terms we're working with here are elements or branches and enlightenment. And we're going to have some particular understandings about how those connect here.
La se ta chetang da di changche se undu kalata chi nyangdi da wachila ta nyangdi da wachil kondu yor ta changche se di nyangdi.
And generally speaking, when we talk about enlightenment, we're talking about nirvana. We're talking about the state beyond suffering.
Ane ta nyangdi di ita di so ta zo nga so chi sem la sam bangor was. Ngaso korwa pa so ani nyangele mandi indu kala ngaso sem de chi yo. Ta tene di nyangdi de ta koalin dibi ge sem ji tubdu kala nyangdi chapo di nyangdi de kande chi des. Ta zo ji sem gi tulu che sam bang ji ni tene namja che go do ma do yang ji sa cha na ji ka sek tin roya de ya he jo ma ta di salam de so sama on do le jar go bras.
And so when we're talking about nirvana, we really need to be thinking primarily about a state of mind or our mind. So as a person, a samsaric being who has not gone beyond suffering, then what is the state of our mind? How is our mind? What is this state of samsaric mind? And when one attains nirvana, when one goes beyond, then what is the kind of state of mind there? And so really we need to be thinking about this presentation of enlightenment and samsara from the perspective of a mind, and not like going to some place from some other place, because all of this is presented about levels of one's experiences and realizations.
Okay. Ani tende song da changche se dingen de ani nge ta ri thonglam hie song tu de on sam da to pin chen ba se nan da. Ani ji nyangel ndi bi hi se nan da ta ka chen ta ri nge ge thonglam sing ne ndi ji ya gu ri se de la ani changche ko.
And so when I talk about enlightenment, the kind of state of mind we're talking about is the state of mind really that I talked about when we were mentioning what is the path of seeing, that it is this supreme wisdom, which is the direct realization of the freedom from all conceptual elaborations. It is the timeless awareness, which is beyond all suffering.
Oh, let's say. And that tender da wuchi bena ta chuni kundu kutam to the one some the topin chamba che any churong so jula yaba ina ani danga so tela teni di re tat na ti ala nga ta de wala che sha de ma se yang di temba la so ra agi yang che shiginda ta bena di churong so da je pa so so le jana te ko de che gre ta churong so na teni ta chu tamche tudo on from the top with an chamber that tambo da which chironson jula yabachi that de la anika said in dinima yena dun they own the rich sambachi then matsena there is a code they check this.
And so Chimedikang, I don't have any Tibetan version to this text. It's in a really huge like 2 pecha volume of text from Khenpo Yunting, so but I have no idea what the page number is. So back to what Khen Rinpoche said, maybe it's easier if you think about this for yourself. So imagine that you have generated your first moment of the wisdom or the realization of the freedom from all conceptual elaborations, the equality, the equal true nature of all phenomena. And so now there's going to be 7 kind of factors, 7 elements, 7 branches to that state of mind.
Let's say that digi chetanga that ki mixa senanda that tasanda jomare that dela tenechi dengi yana diore that demba yektan dela tasanda with the deje.
And so we have first, we have something that we need to be looking at. And so it said, they all share the same object of focus, namely the 4 truths. And so, but they're differentiated according to their form. So first of all, we can say that the 4 truths are the object of focus here. Or we could also talk about it in terms of the 2 truths. And so when we're talking about the timeless awareness or the primordial wisdom of the path of seeing, we're talking about, it's seeing objects and their true reality.
And Mingnam Remba said Dingo, Demba Yigita, Har Gom Yavita, Sujoko with Lasuba Tindigita, Gom Yaviti, Demba Yigita, Nabada, Mingnam Gio Marella, Dim Jibi Chatilla, Trembas in the Pata Yare, Injiko Longu, and Long Coronte Doraco. Then I Jane Rodoyo Marico tuning on some Consadicala could make bad. This is Jane Rodoyo Maritiki Chatini, any Tremba Siayata.
And so now we're going to have 7 of these elements are like 7 kind of attitudes or 7 ways that you're seeing these things. And the first of those is with mindfulness. And so you've already been meditating on the same topics, the 4 truths or the 2 truths or whatever. You've already been practicing them in the past through the path of accumulation and the path of joining. And now you've had a direct experience, a direct realization for them. So of course, there's no way that you're actually going to forget this, but that state, one way that you're seeing them is with this quality of mindfulness.
Ane da nipa tele churum namje sikido. Da churum namje da yin kurang dambo chu tamje ngosam den tongchare da kola ki ngre de ji kawayo da ngaso do chine teso ni tung chetawa gi de mantong de tene ngre de nge reba phanre chende tene di chu den de chu den de se tene mandi ba hi yo mare go thugu yo mare tene pe kal khodo ndi churum namje yin dai ko tu de ngosam den tong reba.
And so the second is you see them with perfect discernment. So of course you see them with perfect discernment because you've had a direct seeing, direct vision of reality here. And so with perfect discernment means that you don't mix anything up. You see it exactly for what it is. And so of course that's the case because here on the path of seeing, you've had a direct realization, a direct experience of reality. And so for us who don't have that direct experience of reality, we don't see things precisely as they are. And so we mix everything up. We don't know how to talk about things precisely because we mix them up. We don't understand them or see them as they are.
That bala pecha ta gunge so jogunge da phagiti kari hek to chinde de kari hek da de nga son thonam de mechati ka tene pe kanga hi ti jap nga so phege de ne chosha le dik sikore ta phne te len na jar chju ne te se len tene kali ya phopa zon da which is zo chini ba la ta pe ne phopa ji ma cha son ne de ya de jar chini ya phopa zo ta ya zo da ti zo do ne nga so de zo ne hi gu cha ko Numba in a dear Marco Chichi Chunico Tatali, Tambo Yudicala, Cotegarama, Hejrema Tuki, then it Yomaris.
And so then, if you're one who has already attained this path of seeing, then there's you when you need to explain the Dharma, you can explain everything perfectly and distinctly and clearly without needing to think about it, without needing to really stubbornly like study and read a bunch of books and put things together to form a lecture. For us who have not attained the path of seeing, then that's what we have to do. We have an example in Tibetan, like we're to give a lecture as an unenlightened person is basically like trying to put together a broken cup. So you take a piece and you stick it over here. You're basically like you're quoting from one text, you bring that in, you quote from another text, you bring that in, you explain a little bit about that. It's just like putting the pieces of a cup back together. And finally, you can give a lecture about some Dharma topic. But for a person who's attained the path of seeing, they don't need to do any of that.
Oh, and then this one's that tuning tones on the Dindigging as a becha di Danayang. Tako zeno korang ragyo mata. Tuning on some tonima tiget, Dindig de Sotamita, Tongdore, Tudore, Rigdore, Contona by Nonin Toniguni, Droduya.
And there's also a difference when we get to read texts who are written by beings who had attained the path of seeing, because they have a really different power of blessing. They're really things that liberate upon sight, liberate upon hearing, upon being aware of them.
Deje nibache. Dene da dinima sumbatela, zundu sigidwa. Da zundu da drowa jil sigio, da tuning on some tones that da dela drowa yongda.
And so the third is diligence, but diligence really means enthusiasm. And so, of course, when you have had this direct experience of reality, you're going to feel enthusiastic.
Then the
fourth is joy.
That Gava said thing in the main Korang Satango rub the Gava see or that Pagi tuning it down the Taka want something tone the captain but one chick that did somebody that Gavala Semeba. Naso in big Gava that Deva sing it as that's only called Mudoya getting it up. Then that Gava Deva something much up at the Jim did suggest somebody Julius Jim.
And so then, of course, there's joy. Actually, the first Bodhisattva level, which is at the same level of the path of seeing, is called supreme joy. And so when one has had this direct vision or direct experience of the meaning of true reality, then this Bodhisattva then experiences limitless joy, something which is incomparable to a worldly, ordinary being's joy. It's a really unimaginable level of joy and happiness.
The nekas in Jumbo, Devo Chando Horserava. That Tonam tuning on some tones at the Delatane, Lungala Xinjiang the Yodi, teaching the Xinjiang Sereta.
And so this word flexibility is also sometimes translated as pliance or pliancy. And so when you, even when just practicing calm abiding, shamatha meditation, one can attain the state of thorough pliancy or flexibility, which means that whatever kind of task you put your mind or body to, they never give up on you. They never talk back. They never they're ready for anything. And so those kind of qualities, of course, then are attained when one reaches the path.
Ani da truba de la ya tingin singskido. That tingin singsedikala ta giving me para tsechi pasiki. And the tuning on some tongue kanza delata kasi giving me palata kasi tsechi pa yingai.
And now for the sixth of these seven elements is the element of concentration. And so this person has had a direct experience, this Bodhisattva has had a direct experience of reality, and that direct experience is single-pointed.
Tenita dimba tela ta nyong sikido ta nyong sing indi kala ta de sem de singwa ta goba la supa meba Tela tene tam nyong se ba ta nga so tam nyong do tu go ma yang na zai do yang na go do go ba sen go se on de pe nam do ge tene ya long tu go hu yo de zai se on de ma sar ban do yo re nga so gom ju di ning cha do ta de me bi ge tene tam nyong de cha do yo da.
And then the seventh quality is evenness. And this is evenness from the perspective of an evenness, which is a state which is without the two faults of meditation of agitation and laxity. So we don't have that evenness. We're always it's either that our subtle wind energy is stirred up, making us agitated and excitable, or we are rendered into a state of a lack of clarity, which is that state of dullness. And so the state which is without those two here is referred to as evenness, and that is the seventh of the seven elements.
Ta deso pe na singola so ba deso tamjin thonglam la yoni te me ba cha sung ji daw ji sam ko ya yo ma de ji tang singo gi cha deso tamji ko njik ten bi hini cham chi la yang di singo deso me ba cha do ya den de ko njik ten bi lam la yang de so ji tang pe ji da ka jolom la so ba deso tamji ni yang de ni ko ka se ngo no ni me ba cha do hu yo de ina ta dini ta la ko to ba me ba cha do hu yo ba ta ko za ba rong ni jengdo di kap te so la tan de ji pa ko go hor ma tu yen de jing de hik de le yang de me ba cha sung ge da de ko jo ma des.
And so one thing to clarify here is that we shouldn't be thinking that necessarily the case that leading up to the path of seeing that this practitioner would have those two faults of agitation or laxity, and that they are finally and only finally eliminated during the path of seeing. Those two faults can also be eliminated during the worldly paths, meaning the paths leading up to the path of seeing through the power of worldly path of concentration of calm abiding shamatha meditation. And so but it's just to render it free of any doubts that they are utterly eliminated here, that they would never come back. Like it's a complete elimination in the mind of the being who attains the path of seeing.
I say that de sung da de lam ji wang de chena thonglam de la yang de ne ka chi ye la wang de chena de ne ka de chang chu ji ye la de se.
And so this is once again talking about in the terms of the path of seeing. And when we talk about the different aspects of the path of seeing, then we have these seven elements of enlightenment.
Tan din de ge pe ji ta di sojon thonggong solam jolam thonglam ge ni ta di de so je hie go na pe yong chen bo ta de jin ha le ya ge mong bo de ta de so tham je le pe ye ba ni ta chi bu de na ta nge ti no ni pe te sta chron so na pe ji ma du chi ni ta ko de bo na chi pe kar se guru ta 고름 첨보대야 고름레스 고름 충충대야 고름레스 나기 고름 첨보지 고 사나야 고 고름 그트마 여리 다 칭칭 찌도 칸로나 고름을 간데 유명 하고도 베데 나기 진행에 대 충충 찌다 체 칼루 요세
Buram sembela.
브럼
So and so there are these paths of training, the path of accumulation, path of joining, path of seeing, and path of meditation. And if you really want to get into it, there are really extensive treatises, really extensive texts, like incredible number of texts written about this with all kinds of distinctions and classifications made. And so I've just given you a little brief summary of this. But as they say, even a small taste of rock candy or a big taste of rock candy, either way, you got taste. So.
Let's say, and that the gong the balata populam yela jebase digente.
And then the last of these sets of 37 factors is the Eightfold Noble Path. So now I'm going to talk about that.
Apena cholam jolam thonglam sin lam sam dosa di gang la yang lam de here. Ni chi undu tene ka se yang di gang de here go ba.
And so we already talked about the paths of accumulation, joining, and seeing, but there's one more still to come. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So there are 5 total paths. So like my 5 fingers here, and we've already gone through the path of accumulation, joining, and seeing, and now we've still got two more here.
Okay. Da di gomlam de. Da gomlam de he on da di gang da on tu de la da ka se papi lam yi ba gang he la yang di gang de on tu ken de la de gomlam se.
And so now we're moving up even further from the path of seeing. So it is still a noble path, or an Arya path, meaning a super mundane path, no longer a worldly path, but that there are even greater qualities than just what we're in the path of seeing.
I say that gomlam ta korang la yang ta nansi ye un de ne ta gomlam sa go se sai go ni ye go de yang ko di sa go se ne de ji ni sai go ni ye un de ne gon ro ji chan do ble.
And so then we can divide, further subdivide the path of meditation into 9 levels, 9 bodhisattva levels.
Ta ji sa sing de ngon tu de la ramba yin de ne chong ren chen bo se de ji som se ni ani de la ko ka se di re la sim chen de ko gon ro yo ta de nga so tring de de hi jo means.
And so when we talk about these bodhisattva levels or bodhisattva bhumis, these are describing levels of bodhisattva's practice or realization. And so when we talk about 9, there is the lesser, middling, and greater, and then each of those 3s are further subdivided into a further 3 each, making 9. But we're not going to get into that today.
Gomlam de gi jenda wode ta thonglam meche ta sojo de thamji tigi jechado yorta.
And so when we talk about what is the cause of the path of meditation, then we count all of the paths leading up to that. So the path of accumulation, joining, and the path of seeing are all the causes of the path of meditation. And the ultimate result of the path of meditation is the state of Buddhahood.
And it in this home that Sanji Sabi, Mujin that they channel, Muskej, that Yenda so good Japan to do your day. And so the path of meditation is the direct cause of meditation. So those other paths, they serve as an indirect or a supporting condition or supporting cause, but they're not the direct cause. The direct cause of the attainment of Buddhahood is the path of meditation. Oh, that in this home that the Tati yun dengi tati chiparchen tigi tati so tati ni tong ta chuni ni tani ya ka se tati pe nguni sachen bogu dorna jin tani gita yun den tamdo so te so she yorda.
And so then there's all these the different factors that make the path of meditation like special or superior to the other paths are like I just said, that it is the direct cause of Buddhahood, where the other ones are just supportive conditions. And then, there are further, just like we have the 12 sets of 100 qualities, now there's 12 sets of 1,000 qualities. And it's like qualities so great. It's like qualities equal in number to all of the particles in the entire world system and things like that. So.
That the Gomlum Korang ni yang de Jiglatani Madasa Dunse. And it Papa sa some say that's how good dun de Madaba ya, some de Papisa Yani, then a Tamadaga Guni to the Sendo Yorda.
And when we talk about the 10 bhumis, Churavala.
La
Adak sa duntan dakwi sa ni sum de la yanchik chuchagurala.
Mother Dunji good Ale Chuchadoda.
That's a ni rela.
Abasasum. Abasasum Madasa Duns.
Ale Madasa doing in an yanchik sa chick de chick or chick.
Oh, they didn't know that did it.
So when we talk about these 9 levels, 9 bodhisattva levels, the 10th bodhisattva level is the very first one. So we're talking about 9 that are encompassed by the path of meditation, but the first bodhisattva level is the path of seeing. And when we break up those 10, we talk about the first 7 as being the impure 7 levels, and the final 3 as the pure 3 levels.
Ken
Rinpoche said, I'm forgetting a lot of this presentation.
Okay, that's it. That the young Tinachic pen Chapanda within the Mabushi, then a Chenabala is Kokale Kapucha.
But it's just going to be really difficult to understand if I get into all the really difficult points of this stuff about the paths and Bodhisattva levels.
Let's say, Anita, this homes and that Dana Casereta, Mada Caserota, Gomlam la, Teni, that's all good. Sancho, Sancho, choose him to start doing noni, and Papi Lami and J said the Yago Sti and Lati.
And so anyway, when we're talking about the 37 factors of enlightenment, our main topic here, and when we get to the path of meditation, then the primary set or the primary practices from within the 37 are the Eightfold Noble Path.
The Casereta, Gomlong Korang de la Oreta, the Palam J Servala, Palam J singing data. Chunig turn topi chaning Papa Charda. Rabata, Nasol Papa Charabata, Chunig turn topan Papa Cha, dig it in a lamguyela, del J Upina J say.
So the reason these are called the Eightfold Noble Path, they are noble paths because a being who has even reached this level has already had a direct realization of reality. So they are noble, they are supreme, they are more noble or more supreme than us. They are no longer worldly beings. And so now these are 8 kind of aspects of the practice of a noble being.
Let's say any
and so those 8 are right view, right thought, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And so these are on page 8 of the text posted on the website.
Let's say that in this home the charita yang tapi tawa se that ambo de tawa de durvala yang tapi tawas.
So the first we're on right view.
That tawa de papa tiki jula ta ore ta kandisi penanganda jigita chuni gitan on something tombi jila ni ki tawa de yang ni ki kar thongwa de dan timbi tawa jingi jula jegre de la tawas.
Okay, that Namchag tawa di Namchag jele and taron di tongdeng in Rachi say what away.
Re ta and ko jithab ge de ra da jithab tawa singin de ko jithab la gorwa de ching de ni on something tombi ta ang imba de jithab tawa la yang te garang che hi.
And so when we talk about the right view, what we're talking about is, for example, if I were having this direct experience, direct vision of reality in my meditative session, even in my ordinary day-to-day life and my post-meditative experiences, I would still have that as my view of reality.
Awala the tutor the tong du kabla Nyamyala the tutor the on some the zing du kala jitabla young that tender what the Nikasi Nyamnikin Gatawa the Julie Chigre that pen a Sanji Dawore Sanji Chakataba tuning on some the tong and it jitab de then it dig it tawa de timba then it tamchi Nyamba tong.
No. So just generally speaking, when we talk about a view or a view of reality, we're talking about using your perfect discernment or your wisdom to cut through any misunderstandings of something and come to an absolute certainty about the meaning of something. But here we're talking about the view of reality, which in this instance is this freedom from conceptual elaborations. It's the view of the equality of all phenomena. And so when one has directly seen that in the meditative practice, then even in their post-meditative experience, they still have that view of the equality of all phenomena and the freedom of all conceptual elaborations.
That depend a pen which is Sanji le Jani. Then I saw Mashi Jana, then go de check it. They do Sanji ge, 냠야의 추탐지 참마다 냠야서 그 말에다 산지 추탐지 두더든 통 대라 아니 대진이 대단 tumbi 지타고 따와대지.
And so this is similar to the vision of a Buddha. So it's easier to understand if we talk about a Buddha, that a Buddha, not only in a meditative session, but in an ordinary experience of day-to-day life, just as they see in the meditative experience, this vision of the true reality of the freedom from all conceptual aberrations, they see that same equality of all phenomena, even in a post-meditative day-to-day state.
아니, 대니 똑바 세딩인데. 똑바 세딩에다 산지게 아니 랑라 딘다비 따와 여바디 옌달라 땡비기던 옌달라 땡두qab라레. 다 옌달라 땡두드네 따당 땡세이다 빼다다 춘이게 던데 마 땡두깔라 코 독선들이 땡요 말해봐. 따티 마 땡동고니 헤운두깔라 델라테네 똑바세.
And then right thought is actually talking about when this practitioner or when a Buddha is going to have to introduce that view to other people. So knowing how to talk about it to the other person. So knowing how to prove that through different philosophical reasons and proofs and so forth. And so what right thought here is actually talking about is the right thought being the right skill in introducing the meaning of reality to others, because it's not something that you can just like show them. You have to actually discuss it with them or prove it to them or show it to them in a particular way. La. No.
추시에디깔라 나랑줄라 따와 가세 간드르더부지 여기 이미 따와나 지정보 가세 줄에 제 여기 이밍티 아니 토픽고닝에 마히용고 도와디
No.
이 파기디가 하고 도와
less
땡색다 해동다 고 가리나요 코페디 똥거라 다 델라들 똑바스 답변은 또 연랑에 처럼서 레하고 가리네 제
No.
또 메네다 깔레 커부슈 지네다 꼬라 잡고 차그라 남깔로 꼬라 살
And so like for me, like let's take this for example, like when I teach you about these things, if I have to teach through having some realization of what I'm teaching. And it's if you're a person who's listening to a Dharma teaching and you have some experience, then you can tell by listening, if you have some good experience, you can tell by listening whether the person who's teaching has realized the truth of those teachings or not. Because if they have realized the truth, then it's very easy for them to tell other people about it. And if they haven't, then they're going to be struggling and talking in circles and not really getting to the point. And so third is right speech. And so then right speech is not only in terms of teaching, but also just that everything that I have come to be within my mind expresses itself in accordance with that realization through my speech. That's what right speech refers to. And so speech then, right speech is the branch which is really important in gaining the trust of others. So I have to realize this view and then explain that view, and through explaining that view and through the ways that I talk, then I can lead people to gain faith or gain trust in the teachings. And so the Buddha, through first teaching his 5 first fortunate disciples and moving forward from there, all of his teachings were done, primarily by speech. And so by expressing himself with right speech, he gained the trust of others. And all the way up to now, we still have such a great amount of followers of the Buddha, all the way from that beginning time, all the way up to now. So next is right conduct. And so then right conduct means that, if I were a Arya, a noble being, then I would not engage in any kinds of misconduct in terms of my body, speech, or mind. But if I were not a noble being, but I were making a pretense of being so, I might be able to keep that up for some weeks or months or even years. But eventually, my pretense will be exposed. And so, like, for example, the Buddha said that he had utterly extinguished all anger from his being. And, but if the Buddha had made such a statement, and then if he had, acted with an expression of anger in terms of his body, speech, and mind later, then it would have, gone against his statement that he had utterly pacified that. And so next is right livelihood. And then no.
Let's say any that dinimata gaseritin soa se undi dangaso sanji getani semjen sejen soalas. Dangaso sok de garigin sokor se di seidege sokiyota. Ta seila ring ramada mambo yorete gachen ta seigin sokor deladin soa se sung sobin soa.
And so mainly when they're talking about right livelihood, segitoa. Now, so mainly what we're talking about is nourishment, like sustenance in terms of gaining our livelihood, not just in terms of like money, but in terms of actually like food, provisions, that sort of thing.
Oh, di sowa de la yang ta yang ta bin sowa yore lopin sowa yore de di longso pangba de la ta go do.
And when we talk about livelihood, we can talk about right livelihood and inappropriate livelihood. And so right livelihood is to be undefiled by or to eliminate or to abandon any kind of appropriate or wrong means of sustenance.
Adin sowa lana shegu jimsan kasede ta di kasere nang ju madana tene ta ngaso kasere lopin sowa goni ta lopin sowa dagu yota ju ta sona ko di lopin sowa goni duku yo mare ta ngaso sowa tanda la ta pe pa zhe ja pang go ko chen go ko ta chachang zo do di song zan tene ko pa pa ina ani kasere lopin sowa yo mare.
So,
the
reason for even talking about this or addressing this topic is because if you were an Arya being, a noble being, then you would have no reason, because your mind stream is purified, you would have no reason, there would be no way for you to engage in wrong livelihood. But as a person without a purified mind stream, then in order to assure your own livelihood, your own sustenance, then you debate, you fight, you deceive people, and so forth. But with a purified mind stream, then an Arya being does not engage in any such inappropriate means of livelihood.
ta pena di lungso de la nga da wuchi labsha ta lungso de la ane ke chunchu se chodan timba maina yin dong do chi raya ge che de la
and so then
there's
there are 5 subsections to right livelihood, 5 kind of types of that. One is making a pretense of your kind of your discipline, even though you're not a pure practitioner or a pure, monastic or something like that. You fake that you are in order to get sustenance.
Ani khasa se unde ta ka se talent hamne pe khat dewo he ne ya phi pe ku ya de.
And the second one is kind of sweet talking people into giving you something.
Ta yolong se gi do ta yolong se ding de ta ngu se ngal gu se malam na ta chi ka se de chi ko jin da wu chi tang chi ni ani ngal chi ra thap chi ya de la.
And then the next one is not directly telling people you need something, but kind of like hinting at it and talking in circles so that it makes them think that you need something, even though you don't directly say that you need something.
Ani thap jin jawa se ta wang thang gu ni thong.
The next one is like actually stealing things from someone else, like actually robbing them.
And
then the next one is giving some very small gift in hopes of a really great reward, in hopes of getting something big back. And so these are all referred to, the literal word is it's kind of a weird translation, but it's like sinful food, but like it's like the kind of food that you would get from that is contaminated by your inappropriate actions, basically.
And then this home danta ko kasede then this home danta kase pen sanji nan soa de chigo do tan soa de chigo de kare sotan timba jeni and rana ko phagi de pe kase tendo yo yoni ene kase ranga te tar rachi ni korong tene yisuma de tate sola tene de longso ma himbase ko chudan timba yo je bimbi ki koni.
And so like even the Buddha still had to sustain himself, had to maintain a livelihood. And so if the Buddha did that with right livelihood, then even the benefactors would want to support him. And so the Buddha would get what he needed, and others would rejoice in that, would be happy with that. And so it means to act in accordance with the principles of the Dharma, and to do that is right livelihood.
The
next is right effort. And generally speaking, right effort means that even though you've already seen reality, you still continue to put effort into familiarizing yourself with it, continuing to meditate.
Dan the so kapsala deni jegere ta pen ore dan de hene yasa ta khahi jege da gomlam thap chani thonglan thap chani zong de deni hida gomya yo mares so simchen ge den rodora jegor ma do gomna den rodon jun chen do se dendri ge den sung hen da yore.
So like at this point, there are some who say, once you've attained the path of seeing, that you shouldn't sit around meditating, that it's now time to start acting for the benefit of being. So there are some people who say that.
And daji ngaso be tadaji da nima da longchen ba da sam gona tene ka se de semjeng rodo chehu gar chehu de so semjeng rodo de che ani di nyam de la tene ka se gomya de so song de.
And so like in our tradition, in the Nyingma Longchen Rabjam says that once one has attained the path of seeing, that one should primarily work for the benefit of beings, but should still continue their meditation practice.
Karan siddhi da di enche ge tene ta nyamle lam re ta ngoko de chube drupa re pango re kasi di enche mathabi jimsa kare drupa de drup de ta e je drupa ko go yore ti chungsa ni raini chembo ni chini ya ya go ho de tangbo chewa de pango ho ta pangwa de tamchi gom go yorta e unde gom bitab di goni ene drug go ho ta ndela ta di chorwa se de de tere ta. So was it? Then did you don't do corona here, Jurava?
And so the reason for that is because, the reason why you should continue in the practice is because, along with each of those paths of practice, each of those stages of the paths of practice, as one moves upwards, there are obscurations which are associated with each of those paths. And until you eliminate those obscurations, then you can't have the level of realization of that level because it's being obscured by this level of obscuration. So we need to continue through the practice to abandon the obscurations to increase the power of our realization more and more and more. And so, like, according to those 9 stages of the path of meditation, there are 9 levels of obscuration. And as we abandon each one, we attain the more and more subtle level of realization, moving further and further through the path of seeing. Let's. And right, mindfulness here is that one never loses the objective focus of this practice, which is now a combination of shamatha and vipassana. The next is right concentration. And here in right concentration, it is an absorption, meditative absorption, which is without those 2 faults of agitation and mental dullness, and which just builds ever greater and greater in concentration, in power.
And
those final 3, which are effort, mindfulness, and concentration, are antidotes. They're antidotal powers, meaning that they are the forces which will lead one to be able to eliminate the obscurations of each of those 9 subsections of this path of meditation. So the way that these work, these kind of branches of practice, or branches of life, or practice, then, are that the first ones, like view and speech and view and speech, are like in order for one to be able to share these things with others, to teach others. And then the next ones, speech as well as livelihood, deal with generating belief or trust from others. And then these final ones are all about serving as antidotes in order to abandon the obscurations.
Anita Kachin, this home that that's and daughter of the Divaina, that Dela Denita, Papi Lam, Denita Cassetti, Yena Jebas.
So those are the 8-fold noble path, the 8 aspects, or the 8 branches of the noble path.
I said that in this home that digging a soda, something to choose some body, and it so
that completes our discussion of the 37 factors of enlightenment.
And that in this home that Dinida, Jetangata, Lam Kuma de la Lam Seta, Yagita, Sanjik Satelata, Yadik Yore.
And so the final of those 5 paths is called the path of no more learning, or path of no more training, which is the state of Buddhahood.
That in this home that Jetang Pena Mada, that sa, that Andelata, Dun Sejerala, that sa, Mata, sa, GP cup this on that sometimes on Tanga, so Nui Taco Cassetti, Ni Jorte. Reva, then Matupa. lata wang jo to yor ta te so ni pe ma to ba wang jo na so go nga ge pe me la so ba nam hi te so te ne ka si hi le ni te so jorung du ka la pe na sa je ba la ti ni jo pe na ta bi hin ta bin tong je ni ta bi hin wang jo ji ni ta ki lam te so la yan tin ri ge ni yon te te yo is.
And when I mentioned previously that the first 7 Bodhisattva levels are called the impure levels, what that means is that on the 8th level, the first of the pure levels, the state of consciousness that we call the afflicted consciousness, which is like your self-grasping mind, transforms into a state of non-conceptual awareness. So you attain mastery over the state of non-conceptual awareness, and all of your 5 sense faculties, your sense consciousnesses, become utterly purified into the state of timeless awareness. And this is the point when, on the 8th Bhumi, when you experience everything as a pure realm, when you have power over the pure realm.
That's it. And it does suck about the Yig Shiba date in Yishis Ninja. Yishis Ninja to be getting out in its tabloids.
And then on the 9th of the 10 Bodhisattva levels, on the 9th level, then your primary mental consciousness, like your thinking mind, transforms into timeless awareness.
That typical Kopsalanga, so the Kunji said, that coaching, that tape as a Sam get the Pachag Rangajita. Pachada Tiba date ninja to this.
Yishila. And so then on the 10th Bodhisattva level, then even our alaya consciousness, the alaya, which is the all ground, we can think of that as mostly like mental patterns. Those also transform into timeless awareness.
Anita didn't charge the goblet, didn't also the Chikasari Sam Jupatamchi Sama de, Anikasari da ninja tapsenamando. The so good and drop up with of Yiguni and then want to choose a Gemando. Then it don't Tatoko Sangia Mato, then it's a lag marvas.
And so at that point, all of these movements of ordinary mind have been transformed or transmuted. All of our obscurations have been removed, and all levels of qualities and realization have been attained. So at that point, there's nothing left but the state of Buddhahood.
And then the Sonzakala, then it Tatoguta. Yonde, that you don't get the longer your dance here, that D Nasota Sat Jiba, but the Hedwa, the main check it, and that Dilly Jana, Hindanijan, Savata, Jibata, Zupi Yonde, then it's Hanjil Tabuyore. In this had been covered that you're the inner at the Kosaji Zupuguni, this Hanjil, Tatom to Chipano with the channel yore.
And so then when those, all of those qualities, you know, are perfected or are gone through or are developed through what we call the paths of training up to and including the 10th Bodhisattva level, you know, we're almost just like a Buddha, like really similar. Our qualities are very similar to the Buddha, but the distinction is that those same qualities become ever more clear, ever more present, ever more expansive, and ever more perfected in the state of Buddhahood from the 10th level Bodhisattva. 10th level Bodhisattva looks and acts very similar to a fully perfected Buddha, but not quite the same.
And then that to be the Sanji Delata, my Eva Chiong, the Kui Eva. Then that Yishigi Eva said that's over the then go to them by his in it, number Iguni, Eva Yachin, then the Gogo, Tape, then it's Hanji get the Sota, Jihichin Mahi.
And then when we talk about Buddhas or Buddhahood specifically, then there are primarily 2 kind of distinctions. We talk about kayas and wisdoms, or kayas and timeless awarenesses. And so we talk about kayas as like kind of the support within which wisdom or timeless awareness is contained. And so there's really extensive explanations about that whole topic.
That's it. And already then this song that Nigidina that be Chisuke the second rotation. And that then this song that Galata, Ni Dinimash here the Karishigos, that I here the Zondo, Yaya, Dawchini, and it was on here the years.
And so I've already been talking for an hour and a half here. And so just to sum some things up here, one point here is that everything I've been talking about here tonight has been from the perspective of the Sutra tradition.
Ani tende songzang kala ta dig nalo la ani chenaba ta sengeng nalo la ta chik nyamle yas nang dingen da chik kowa de so yapu yu dingen de yo yasare ta phatsa de kamin nang de kala ani ta da nge de dini dan sen dan thongum do de ani chik chenaba la ta di phentu chungre samni tene ngarang gi na chik dini de se ka se thup thum da ji pha sabo da wu hyu ta ti yes.
And so, I know that amongst those of you who are listening, that there are some of you who are quite advanced practitioners and have some quite good understanding of the teachings. I don't, on my screen here, I don't know exactly who's here. I don't see your faces or your names, but I'm sure that you're here. And so I was really thinking that this would be helpful for some of you. And so I really did do my best to try to communicate and really try to communicate the meaning and give you a good understanding of this topic.
And then the someday la days ta choosing the one tombo da what the rain do. Then it did on the Sabbath so like the down days of Gina Yore in a young ta Kasechi, then there's Jenny Chenabagata, whoops, chick, then a goya che the ending takes choosing da. Here don't they are pa days go. Pechangama young and a go young and that they see Yaman young and a watiga. Yearned a wati yani. That time you choose him to start doing the long journey. Take my huge advantage.
And so then sometimes, I have to use I have used some very specific and kind of high level specific Dharma terminology. And so I know that's kind of difficult for some of you who might be beginners or newer to some of these topics. And so, but I tried to give, a real like rough and real condensed understanding of all of this. And to do that, I have to use, or I did use a lot of particular kinds of Dharma terminology and so forth. And I think that will communicate better for those of you who are more advanced in your studies and practice than talking about it in simple words. So that was what I thought would be best in terms of this topic of the 37 branches of enlightenment and its connection with the 5 paths.
And then this home dang so chik nyamlen nangenda takes chik loju nangen so la yang then nge chik here yo. Ta kare is the ngaso be di dongha ni bo de Nika de takes sheet of a chinrona, then Yakudu Sedabal. Matu, when chick do round the Palo Jung Chendong, the Tsuk Jing da Chicha, Ma the Tsuk Jing and the Cha, did Nipo de, then chick Yamden Roma Tabizono. Then this Jenny, young and Tomanda, young Zanganda, young chick, then the Wuchi, Gavachenda, the Tongo Hudua, de Main Bachini, Yamden the Wuchipa, wrote to be a pento des.
And so that's it. And so then one other thing I want to mention to some of you who are practitioners and who are really studying Dharma is that I think it's really, really good for you to learn both Sutra and Tantra. Because a lot of people, they only study Sutra or they only study Tantra, and then they don't really have a good even understanding of Dharma. And then what happens is that they either start to kind of have a perception that one is better than the other, or one is higher than the other, or that they are contradictory to each other, that Sutra and Tantra are contradictory to each other. And so it's really important for understanding how they work together, how they're not contradictory, and how they, and all of this, it's really important to study both sides.
Di ndo korang ye yaung de kalange tari sa jeba la da kare di nyai dang teni go ngai nam ni de kabla matu pala wang jwa dang ta pi heng lo wang jwa se ji ndo korang no ni he ong yorde e he ong ko a di kha hi ji ge pe ne ji nga ge ko la su pa de so de ji yi ma chi ba so do de so tam ji kun da ge nam ba do de sam tang ne ma bu cha do do. And
so, like, for example, when I just talked about this, the thing that happens on the pure bhumis or the pure levels, like at the 8th Bodhisattva level, when your afflictive consciousness becomes purified into timeless awareness and you gain the power over non-conceptuality, and when your 5 sense consciousnesses become purified into timeless awareness, you gain power over the pure realms. You know, that's specifically from the sutras. That's exactly what is said in the sutras. And so there are some people who only study sutras who have some mistrust of tantras because they're talking about these like visions of deities or pure visions or something like that, and they think that's tantric stuff. But this is straight out of the sutras.
And Kahiji ben dolog do wuji chimbo ta dingen so dog non lo la ta tani ma he ji so do ha non ge ge lo ba so do tinde thong do te mare te song da kam dana tinde ke ba ma che yagi ngon du jen te so ku non lo la shen ta jung si be de ko shin kan ta ba jang ya ge ka nyam ne che ya de ji ba yue dia tinde yo de ta ti ta de so ma ge ti do rang ta nge ji na sam tang go do as.
And so like some people who really just focus on studying the sutras, you know, it's not only in this presentation, but in the Abhisamaya Lankara, the ornament of manifest realization, which is a primary text of Mahayana scripture. It talks about the purification of your consciousness to see the pure realms. And so you know, that it's not just some talk in a sutra. There's the whole practice in order how to do that, how to purify your consciousness into one of seeing the pure realms and so forth. So even if you are really focused on the sutras, you also need to understand the sutras well enough that you're not just making presuppositions, that you actually know that even in the sutras they talk about pure lands and deities and all this kind of stuff.
Chime tse ngudu nyeri se di Khen sabonda chi. Mutsoku dende tongen do te ndo korang nanglu la di yodi hore. Penan tonglam la. Tonglam topi ganza de la ani kaseri di tse la wang juba dende tako sanji le ichi jenge ji yo na dende sanji ge ndo diba ge nanglu song yore. Gandri song yore se di ga dan na dan chewa me kyang chenpo tons. Sancho simba sa tangbo yenche la gawa ta nawa ta chawa ta yo mare ina ya tenda wo simche na la tongre se tende do khrom ne he yorda.
And then, you know, there are some people as well who, when they hear about Guru Rinpoche attaining the supreme immortal state, this supreme city of immortality, they think that's really strange and maybe fake or whatever. But in the actual sutras, one of the qualities of the path of seeing is going beyond birth, aging, sickness, and death. That a person on the path of seeing attains the power over life, power of immortality, essentially. And so there's a quote: if you have trust in the Buddha, then you should read the Collection Sutra, or the Collection Sutra, which the Buddha says, even though these bodhisattvas on this level of the path of seeing and upwards don't experience sickness, aging, and death, they'll still display that for the need of others if the necessity arises.
Ane ta tegana ye tenju senanda maungbi sanji senanda ane julama ta jasa zamba ngom song ye julama nanola phagbi cheta nawata gabi dunga tsene pong. Leda nyemu karengo leda nyemu wang ge tela na karengo tela teme satemes leda nyemu bage jeba tela yomares. This in jula non superior.
And then in the Uttara Tantra, which is not a tantric text, it's just the name. Tantra means continuum. So it's a sutra text written by Maitreya, who will be the next Buddha. And so he says that for an Arya being, they have no death, no sickness, no illness. They have abandoned them from the root. And that they have thoroughly cut off the movements of karma and the afflictions, and they will never arise again.
Oh, la supata, tende sonza ji kaseongo. Zancho simba namje, tenda wo ten chugre, ko doja nan ten chugre. Ina ya rangu la rangzen bagata tenda wo tende, tende di yomare se tende mambu yores.
So there are many such statements that a bodhisattva does not experience birth, aging, or death like for themselves, but for the purpose of training others, they could show that. They could show the way of being sick or the way of dying or whatever, but they do not have any solid experience of any of those things.
Nase, ta kachenji tende ta ngasobe di pela di ya ga zasa se. Ya shara se de me ngoya me dingen de ge zasa na khora me yosa te ma do za yin da thong byo ma ko ti chu rang phasa yin da di yong ro yo re. Te do ma ba ya me ni ka yong ne ko te za ndu ne yo se yi ni ka phasa ne do ge ndu ne yo se. Ya te ne me ngoya me ne kon de man thong ko ma de kon de na so ja pha ba ji ma pha ba lab de ge se. Te de do ma
so we have an example in Tibet that we say, don't study the Dharma like a one-eyed yak eats its grass. So if the yak only has one eye, it's only going to keep following in the direction where it can see off to this side. So it'll keep going only in one direction. But a yak with both eyes will see all the grass on both sides and eat it, you know?
Oh, let's say, Ani, oh, then this songs are Galata. So that you don't get the Latin to choose it out in Dollar Jenny Yoba. Nala Jenny Heba, the Yore, in a net that I come talk around Jenny Head of Yores.
So there are presentations both of how the 37 factors apply to sutra context and how they could be applied in a tantric context, but I specifically here talked about them in the context of the sutra presentation.
Let's say, and then the song that that then is such a neat among me here in the Tasson. Then it down agony mata, or tanto to choose some stuff in go so near any tata, but the Kale man broji, any tarita, Hama, the tari chadius.
And so now I've gone on for almost 2 hours here. And so now I'm finally completing this teaching on the 37 factors of enlightenment that we started quite a while back and have been slowly moving through.
Let's say, and then this home that they gala the name that was oh, just think it that the Traja is Zoa, Traja, only Traja zo. Yella, gave George. Then Jola Negasona, the Tamchis, but Jane do the color transom, the Chiba Chini, Gisam, the Maruana or cutting chase.
So thanks to Justin, who helped me in the beginning, middle, and end of this teaching, when he'll make sure I'm set up with my internet connection, and then in the middle of the teaching, he'll translate the teaching, and in the end, he'll remind me to say a dedication prayer.
And it that you don't get the just and Tima Tambo, Yen developed schedule pubs in Tambo in the Jare. Tambo Nejing any to the Gala patching Haman, this is or the Madu, Sabas or the Medu Sonangati. Yen Semo Kareniching, somebody take Danny Kajan. They need Tata, but the Yen Joanna with Tia Mange. Then they are pay co 10 brother Yakuendo, Tape Yakuindo.
So from the first time that I met Justin, when he came here to the Buddha Garden, when we met, it was like we already knew each other. It wasn't like meeting someone new at all. And we sat around talking for many, many hours into the middle of the night. And so from that point all the way up until now, our connection hasn't changed at all. And so we have a really, really great interdependence, a great auspicious connection.
Oh, let's say, and then this one that Yenila mix again when it lay down. Timo mai big temperature yoba. Chicken aranga, the garang, the some drank here. They got around there, some little trend year, and it is some that the need, another just there, Latini, that it's on my banita, low mambo chicken and developed the night tamjela, took your chest.
And so I really think that Justin and I have some really special karmic connection, and it's been not just this time, but for many years. I want to say thank you, not just for this teaching, but for our work together for over the course of many years.
And that Chenaba de Loma Nanola, Yachi, Nanola, to say the Pe Kalakabuchi or that Sosuleka, Chegori, Soso Nansanta, Tungu, Yorita, Kashi, Pachin, going in Joba de Patunga, Jongere, Kashi Lovo, Tenda, Jongere, Kachi in a Mina, and Chenaba Dovachi, oh, Kati, so Jamneta, Pubding and Tamchila, and Tenita, Puji Chase.
And also for all of you listeners here, I know it's very difficult for you to find the time, especially people here in America. And there are probably some of you amongst you who came to all of these teachings on the 37 factors, and some of you who might have dropped in from time to time. And I know it's difficult. You've got time with work and kids and all the stuff. So I want to say thank you very much for putting in the effort to be here.
And it's near Sambalata. Chetanga pedi chik nyamle nange chi na yang chik lam je ramba na chik ndrogo yaba tang tin robi top di goni kop tena tene yon ten kandri chi batte ha koya ge che ta ane yang dile chik nyamjam rawo chi chenge ina yang o chik lam je ramba tindi chi duas sem go ramba tindi chi drone tindi chi yung duwa samba chi ha koya ge che de la tene nge ga shegi 마도 딩상 파체가 소지 샤피 동에 저도 섬나 땅지는 되게들 지 나사제 닥스파 욕자지 저도 양나 진고가 안데 지는 부진 자운데 마 욕자비 저도 든리게 섬나 땅에 된도 많이 봐 람제 럼바여 봐 텔레테니 에네 소소라지 니지 셈발라 펜토여 봐지 대 학고야 체데 에네 얘기디 깔레 카포지 여되나 되게 되바니 아니 대양 되니 학고야
And so, in my thinking, people who are practice step by step. And when practicing step by step, it's good to know, as you move through different levels of practices and levels of your mind, what kind of qualities will arise. So it's in order for you to know that I teach these things. And also, if you're someone who's just researching, just investigating Buddhism, it's really interesting. It's good for you to know. And it's also, I also teach this for you guys to know that there are these stages of the path, and that when you're progressing through a stages of path, it's actually progressing through stages in your mind. And so, these days, I think there are some people who think that they might have some problem, some emotional problem or something, and that just like having a surgery, you could just take it out. Or if you've got some like lice in your hair, you could just remove them. And so, but it's not like that. And it's really important to know that there are stages that one has to go through to develop, to be able to overcome these kind of issues and things. And so, it is in order for people to know that there are these stages, and that this practices have to happen in stages, that I've gone through such difficult kind of bit of material here. And so I really hope that was helpful for you all.
다 다리 두발에 제시에 고테 제선도 다데 가르세디 네 다리 마기 솔롬니 연대 해지다 여기 산지 사이 받는 연대 해지 대탐지 롱chen 바게 점탄적 나노라 가르송 요르세디 대탐지 서든 말에 랑게 샘줄라 나 연대 여바 디게다데서 드바데 파사타 고니 다텔라디 trajectory or that jam the pasata guni say you don't want to jong the mato ngarang embach sis zombo charging the mare song yore they just demares.
And one thing that I meant to mention that I forgot about was that Longchen Rabjam, in his Precious Treasury of Philosophical Systems, he says that all of these qualities that are developed, or qualities that are revealed, from starting on the path of accumulation all the way through the state of Buddhahood, none of those qualities are something new. They are something that you already had in your mind stream, but were obscured. And it is through the power of eliminating those obscurations that what those qualities which were already present are revealed. And so if I use Dharma language, we refer to those things as the things which are to be revealed, or the things which are to be revealed through the power of removing the obscuration. And then Buddhahood is referred to as the result of that separation. And so it's not as if what Longchenpa says, it's not as if you're someone who is bad or lesser and you become good or greater. It's a matter that those qualities were already there. You already have those qualities, and it's just a matter of revealing them by eliminating obscurations. And that is 100% true.
파기코 생그디 히디게 남바디야 땅도와 데 가니케리 째요 말했다디 파기란 톡 치치니 그 코베 깔리카지데 코 랑기 린자데 셈라 여자 디 톡도디 마시장야 탕도와 니 디제오니 롱체바 덴바리 세디 덴디지 히에기요 마다 따테지 가시니 사바 제주지 나 메주지 럽구르스나 나서 문도와 땡가서 하고도와.
And so I'm not just saying that it's true because Longchenpa said so. I'm saying that, for example, like when our mind is totally stirred up like a pot of boiling water, and then we allow ourselves to calm down and we experience, like, for example, if we settle into a state of meditation and we experience this peace of mind, that peace of mind did not arise from somewhere. It's just by the power of the calming down of that turbulence in our mind that we experience that calm, which is already part and parcel of who we are. It's already part of us. And so that is just like what Longchenpa says, that those qualities are already there within us. And it's from that perspective that I can say that what Longchenpa says is 100% true. And it's not just because I'm following after it because he said so.
And 추셰딩에 실하게 냠네 제딩에 디기타 되소그 끼고 냠뇽데 히온데 추기 빼차 말로브네 말로니 코 파케 잡니 히온데 갈라 소수기 냠뇽데서 따용고도스.
And like for me, like when I'm teaching some of my students and leading them through the practices of calm abiding and special insight, shamatha vipassana, many of them who don't even know and who have not even studied the Dharma text, just through explaining their experiences, they are explaining experiences and qualities and states of mind which are described in the text.
근데 용구도와 이 원이 말에 나서 샘라고 연대 포섬 소바 예바데 나서 드디지가 하고 투요래 아니 대동 지바데 소가야 때서 나서 팽그래 드디 송다 땅이 들인 너디나 아니 드발라다 지 람징원도 다데네 장조 연라 장조 추구 추심지 자듬보데 아니 마다 휘차바이 아니 제나바게 대동 팀비 쳐지고니 아니 사모타.
And so, really, these days, people who have so many different diverging opinions and thoughts about their lives. There are many people who think that there's no one who's got it off worse than them. And they have this really serious illness of, depression and like a poverty kind of mentality. But that's really not the case. We have an abundance of great qualities within us. And so, it's really too beneficial to know that. It's really helpful to know that. And so to summarize, we are now done going through all of these 37 factors of enlightenment, which are qualities of this path, of the path to enlightenment. And so I would encourage you all to think about this, give this some more consideration.
담보 내게나 단 성근나 아파지 무게가 나름부터 되니 다 내몸 선섬돼서 담기더니 희약이 체대 아니 뭐하다 말아 렌직도 넘버시스.
And so now I would encourage you to take all of the virtues that we have gathered here this weekend today from me teaching and you listening to these teachings and dedicate them and make aspirations with them for all of these difficulties in the world right now that we've been experiencing. First off, this great illness, second, war and strife, and third, even famine and starvation in this world. And so to eliminate these difficulties, the three difficulties of illness, warfare, and famine, then say some dedication and aspiration prayers.
Sonum de ye tonje ziba ni tona ni be dana bamze eki ga nam de balan druba ye se ben so ben do